Good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome you here to the Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So we're here Sunday night. It's time for the episode of Commonalities Compared. This is a show that I put on every Sunday night, which we talk about two rock commonalities. Could be two guitarists, could be two bass players, could be two albums, maybe two producers or two rock artists. In this case, it's two rock bands, and they are April Wine and Triumph. Yeah, so this is a show in which Ben, a subscriber of mine, has given me, he usually gives me two of those commonalities, and then I talk about them and compare them. It's actually a very interesting selection here. Usually Triumph is lumped in with Rush. That's usually where the comparison is. Not really fair to Triumph. They don't really play the same style of music. Rush is an exceptional, gifted instrumental band and have done very well with themselves. So I don't really think it's all that fair to compare them. I see the commonality between the two. They're both Canadian. They're both from Toronto. They're both power trios. But I think this makes much more sense as a comparison. Both these bands have a lot more in common, I think. So, Triumph, April Wine. So what's the commonality here? Well, first of all, they're both Canadian. So these are two Canadian bands that kind of came out in the 70s. April Wine a little bit earlier than Triumph. Both of them did okay initially, but not spectacularly, and then came on later towards the end of 1970s and into the early 80s. Both of them achieved that success based on a style. The stuff that did well on the radio was very smooth, commercial sounding, hard rock. In the case of Triumph, it might have been a little bit heavier. You might want to classify them as a sort of a metal band. I wouldn't. I don't think of Triumph or April Wine as metal bands. I think of them both as hard rock bands with a variety of other sounds to their music. Also, they're both Canadian. April Wine's kind of from Halifax, although they did have their base of operations in Montreal, where Triumph was definitely a Toronto-based band, a power trio, and April Wine primarily a five-piece band. I at one time followed both of these bands a lot, especially in the late 70s and early 80s, when both of them had their zeniths. Triumph with their Just a Game, Progressions of Power, Allied Forces, and Never Surrender. All those albums doing exceptionally well for them in the early 80s and late 70s. April Wine with their Harder, Faster, The Number, The Beast, and I think there was another album that came out right after that. All did very well. Those albums did well as well. Both of them have exceptional singers. With April Wine, it's a one-guy kind of thing. He's very smooth, very commercial sounding, very distinctive voice. And to be honest with you, I think Rick Emmett fits that bill almost equally, or maybe better. Very smooth, very distinctive, very commercial sounding voice, whereas Gilmour is completely different than either of them. He has a very kind of different sounding voice. It's more bluesy oriented. It's got that emotional tinge to it that I think these other two have good emotional tinge. He has exceptional emotional tinge to his music, I think, at least to his vocals part. The other thing, when Gilmour's singing, I find that the band tends to be heavier and the guitarists tend to be like really kind of a lot more bluesy and heavy sounding, and the instrument and the soloing is great. And that's because Rick doesn't have to concentrate on singing as well. He just has to play the guitar. So I think almost all of the guys in the two bands are really good musicians, all of them. Having said that, I think Rick Emmett is probably exceptional, so he may be better than all of the others. He's just an exceptional guitar player with an exceptional voice. He was going to be a rock star no matter what, I think. The fact that he did that with Triumph just elevated the band that much more. An exceptional musician. I think he does not take a backseat to any guitar players out there. Is he the best guitarist of all time? No, I'm not saying that, but he definitely is in that group of people. And as for the rest of the musicians in either of these bands, I don't think you can say that about them. I think they're all good musicians. They all have some very good skills, but I think he's exceptional. Triumph, of course, put out a lot of their albums are kind of different in a lot of ways. They have a lot of different flavors to their music. So they've got hard rock, definitely. They've got some of that commercial hard rock sound. They've got that commercial pop kind of sound to their music. They have some hit singles, but they also have this kind of a heavy, kind of almost progressive sound to their music at times too. And they have a substantial amount of that kind of heavy bluesy stuff that you might find with a band like Led Zeppelin. Some real like strong guitar riffing. The drums are strong and heavy. And then I think Gilmour's voice really lends itself well to that bluesy sound that I always think of as being Triumph's best, one of their best things. I chose this album because this is kind of pre big time. They had some success with this album. Don't get me wrong. This may be their first kind of album that people began to recognize them. A Rock and Roll Machine is as good a song as any. Street Fighter and Street Fighter Reprise, both really solid. Blinding Light Show or Moonchild, always really liked this song a lot. And then, of course, they had the song that they took from Joe Walsh, which is Rocky Mountain Way, and they did it better. I'm sorry, Joe, but they did. Bring It On Home, that's that kind of bluesy flavor to it as well, and it takes time. Yes, this was a good, solid foundation for what came later. April Wine had lots of really strong albums too. Just about every album they did from the mid to late 70s on had at least one or two fairly big hits. Triumph's maybe their biggest song of all time is probably the one that I detest the most, which is Magic Power. I don't really care for that song, but it's kind of a signature song from, or Hold On, those two, both of them. April Wine's, of course, is Ooh What a Night. That's probably their biggest and most well-known song, although they do have Harder, Faster, which is also really strong. Roller, Bad Side of the Moon, the list goes on. The biggest difference, I think, in the two bands later on is that Triumph, although they became a lot more commercial sounding and did have that kind of poppy magic sound, they really weren't a ballad band at all. They tend to lean more towards the kind of heavier commercial sound, where April Wine started popping out ballad after ballad, and a lot of their hits were ballads. So that to me is the biggest difference between the two. April Wine also has that 3-guitar attack, which is unusual. Not many bands have that. Iron Maiden comes to mind. There's probably a couple of others, but they definitely have that 3-guitar attack. Triumph has one guitarist, but he's probably better than all three of the guitarists in April Wine. Nothing against those guys. They're all good guitar players, but he's just exceptional. So anyways, that's my take on Triumph and April Wine. I think the only reason I haven't really followed April Wine in recent years is because I found it difficult to find their albums. I don't know why that is. When I'm looking through the bins and going out in stores and stuff like that, and going to my favorite store, I don't see a lot of their stuff around. I mean, I could go into the new stuff to purchase, but even there's not really much there. I mean, I have to go online. I'm not much of an online person. Where Triumph, they have an exception. They usually have all of their stuff So it's just a matter of getting it for the price I want. And lately I've been doing well with that. I've got 3 of them over the last year or so. So I have their first 7 albums. So they have a distinct advantage over April Wine here because I don't have any of that early April Wine stuff that I like. Anyways, that's my take on April Wine and Triumph. Both excellent bands, both great success at a pretty much similar time period. So I hope you've liked this episode. If you have, please hit the like and subscribe. That's much appreciated. If you want to make any comments about the 2 bands, you can put them there. Just remember, these are just my opinions and then my own experiences. Your experience might be vastly different. Maybe you see the bands completely different than I do. Maybe you don't like either of them, or maybe you don't like Triumph, or maybe you don't like April Wine, but either way, you're welcome to your opinions. You put those in the comment section. Also, don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode of Commonalities Compared, which will be out next Sunday. I'm interested to see what Ben's going to give me for that episode as well. So take care and have a good one. Goodbye.